Live from London, this is BBC News. Parties make their final pitches to the public on the last day of general election campaigning. A Conservative cabinet minister tells the BBC he accepts polls point to a massive Labour majority. Other news, Jamaica braces for life-threatening winds and torrential rains as Hurricane Beryl approaches. The mother of the missing teenager Jay Slater reveals her pain and agony after police in Tenerife ended their search. Hello, I'm Marianne Mashiri. Welcome to BBC News. Well, it's the last day of election campaigning, isn't it? And today, a Conservative cabinet minister told the BBC he accepts that if the polls are correct, the Labour Party is heading for the largest majority this country has ever seen. Mel Stride's comments come as party leaders head into their final campaign events. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has told a Conservative Party rally he will fight for every vote, while Labour leader Keir Starmer insists people who want change have to vote for it. Here's our political correspondent, Helen Catt.
The Labour leader says this morning that he wants people to have more money in their pockets. And if Labour win on Thursday, he says he wants them to be better off in 5 years' time than they are now. He also told The Times he wants public services to improve by then too. But he said he would need a strong mandate, lots of votes in support, to do it, as there would be difficult choices. A message he was reiterating yesterday on the campaign trail.
If you want change, you have to vote for it. The polls do not predict the future. Constituencies like this will be very, very tight on Thursday. So every single vote counts. Every single vote has to be earned. And we have to make sure that until the polls close at 10 o'clock on Thursday, we are earning the respect and the trust of the confidence of voters across the country, because change will only come if you absolutely vote for it.
Rishi Sunak will aim his message directly at wavering voters later. The Tories will claim a small number of people in tight races could stop a big Labour win by lending the Conservatives their vote. He'll agree that a big Labour majority is not a foregone conclusion, but unlike Keir Starmer, he'll warn it would be damaging if it happened, as he did in a speech to supporters last night.
On Thursday, it is not a by-election. It is not a referendum on our party or the past. It is a choice about the future of our country and what that future means for you and your family. If there is an unchecked, unaccountable Labour Party in power with a supermajority, think what that would mean for everyone. A Labour Party with a blank cheque to do whatever they want.
Also talking about lending votes, the Liberal Democrat leader. Sir Ed Davey told The Guardian he thinks people are getting into the swing of tactical voting, where people who usually back different parties support the candidate best placed to beat the Tories. He claims that will make this election a once-in-a-century chance to change the political geography of the UK. Yesterday, he criticised the Conservatives' ability not just to govern, but to be in opposition too.
The Conservatives have been a failed government. They'd be a failed opposition. They're so divided, they can't even provide a strong opposition. If people want a party that's got principles and values and ideas and great local champions to oppose whoever is in government, the Liberal Democrats are here to do that.
We fought a really strong campaign.
The SNP is claiming today that the result in Scotland is too close to call and says a Labour government in Westminster would mean more austerity, which Labour has previously denied. All parties know they don't have long left now to make up voters' minds. Helen Catt, BBC News.
Well, an indication of just where the Conservatives see things heading. This came this morning from the Work and Pensions Secretary, Mel Stride. Speaking to Emma Barnett on the Radio 4 Today programme, he conceded a massive Labour majority was on the cards. Have a listen.
So I totally accept that where the polls are at the moment means that tomorrow is likely to see the largest Labour landslide majority, the largest majority that this country has ever seen, much bigger than 1997, bigger even than the national government in 1931. What therefore matters now is what kind of opposition do we have? What kind of ability to scrutinise government is there within Parliament? And that is a strong reason to not give the Labour Party that.
Sorry, you have accepted, as Working Pensions Secretary, that the election is lost?
I have accepted that where the polls are at the moment, and it seems highly unlikely that they're very, very wrong because they've been consistently in the same place for some time, that we are therefore tomorrow highly likely to be in a situation where we have the largest majority that any party has ever achieved.
So you could say the Conservatives have lost?
We are fighting for every single vote.
Well, look, here is our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman's reaction to what Mel Stride had to say.
This is not normal. It is not typical, to state the obvious, for a cabinet minister, or indeed any politician really, to essentially concede defeat the day before millions of voters go to the polls and actually determine what the outcome of this general election is. So what is Mel Stride trying to do? Well, look, it's been clear for a few weeks that the Conservatives think that their best hope of averting a vast Labour victory is, perhaps counterintuitively, to talk up a vast Labour victory. And that's what they've been doing for ages with the supermajority rhetoric, which we've all become familiar with. But this goes way beyond that. This is not a possible supermajority that Mel Stride was alluding to. He said it was almost certain that Labour would win the biggest majority any single party has ever won. It's extraordinary rhetoric, and needless to say, I don't think this is what would have been in the Conservatives' campaign grid as their closing message when they called this election 6 weeks ago.
It's the final day of campaigning, Henry, and that final message, apart from Mel Stride's message, but what are the main parties trying to put forward today to voters on this very last day, last gasps?
Well, in a more low-key and less dramatic way than Mel Stride, it is basically the Conservatives' closing message that, as it stands, Labour are going to win and going to win big. And so Rishi Sunak will be using that supermajority language as he campaigns in the southeast of England this afternoon to try to win back Conservative waverers. I think, actually, what he's doing in trying to talk up how big a Labour victory could be is he's not really targeting that message at people who might vote Labour, but actually at people who might vote for Reform UK or for the Lib Dems. He's trying to win them back to the Conservative fold, almost pitching the Conservatives as a strong opposition rather than as a potential party getting a fifth term in government, which is what they would get if they win this general election. And actually, a lot of the smaller parties, they're also arguing that this election is a foregone conclusion because they want potential Labour voters to decide that they can vote for a different party because the course of government is fixed. So you end up in this funny position where Labour, and Keir Starmer is campaigning in England, Wales and Scotland today, and Labour are basically the only party here saying that a Labour victory isn't inevitable. It's all a bit shaken up. But what you will hear from Labour today is that, yes, change, that one word that's been their slogan throughout this campaign, but that it only happens if you vote for it. And that's the message you will hear Keir Starmer hammering again and again, because they don't want potential Labour voters to stay at home or vote for someone else because they think that other people are doing the business of voting for Labour and getting them into government.
Well, that's Henry Zeffman talking about the message that Sir Keir Starmer is hammering home. Well, Sir Keir Starmer was asked about Mel Stride's comments, and he's described them this morning as indicative of a negative Tory campaign. Have a listen.
I think the Tories have run a very negative campaign, and they're failing to answer the question, what positive change would they bring for the country if you voted
What do you
Tory?
make of this particular messaging around what Mel Stride has said today? Like, what do you think of it as a tactic?
It's more of the same. It's really voter suppression. It's trying to get people to stay at home rather than to go out and vote. I say if you want change, you have to vote for it. I want people to be part of the change. I know there are very close constituencies across the country. I don't take anything for granted. I respect the voters, and I know that we have to earn every vote until 10 o'clock tomorrow night, and we will do that. But I do say to those that are still contemplating their vote, if you want change, and I genuinely think most people do, you have to vote for it. The change we can bring about will be hugely significant for our country. Be part of it so we can move forward as one country to improve the living standards of millions of people across the country.
Let's cross live now and speak to our political correspondent, Hannah Miller, who's in Westminster for us. And Hannah, interesting, isn't it, that the last thing Labour want is for people to be talking about this being a secured, massive Labour majority. They really are still pushing that message that if you want a Labour government, you have to vote for it.
I think it is interesting because for a long time, frankly, even before this general election was called, one of the Labour Party's biggest concerns was that there is so much lack of trust in politics, so much apathy among voters towards politicians of all colours, that it would be difficult to convince people that change is possible, that it's worth coming out and voting. And we've seen, as Henry was saying there, this kind of argument that the election is a foregone conclusion being used as something of a tactic by the Conservatives for several weeks now, but it's ramped up and ramped up again today, and it really plays into, I think, what has for a long time been one of Labour's biggest fears. That's why you hear Keir Starmer today suggesting that it amounts to voter suppression, really quite a strong line, I think, for him to be using at this stage, this idea that telling people it's a foregone conclusion might mean that they just sort of stay at home and don't quite bother, and the Labour Party see that as a real threat. They want to be able to not just win as many seats as possible, but have as many votes as possible. They want a real mandate for their policies and their platform. And I think you saw that as well this morning in the kind of rallying cry that Keir Starmer was giving at his speech in Carmarthenshire in Wales as he heads off on his tour across Britain on the final day of campaigning. We're going to be hearing an awful lot about how some constituencies might come down to just a few hundred votes, because for the Labour Party, that really is one of their kind of central fears, and winning just those last few hundred votes in a certain constituency can, when it ultimately comes to Friday and seats here in Westminster, it can really make a massive difference to whether or not a party looks like it has a huge majority or whether it's more a closer call.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Hannah, for that, our political correspondent in Westminster. So look, it's the last day of campaigning for all the parties, isn't it? Not just Labour and the Conservatives. And the SNP leader, John Swinney, has been out telling Scottish voters that although the result appeared a foregone conclusion in England, it's still too close to call in Scotland.
The election is well and truly over and done with south of the border, and the issue for Scotland is who's going to protect Scotland's interests in the next Westminster Parliament. And people know they can rely on the SNP to do exactly that. So the SNP MPs who will go to the House of Commons will be campaigning against austerity. Labour are going to carry on the Tory austerity. I want SNP MPs to rail against austerity so we get investment in our public services. And I want to make sure SNP MPs are arguing to make sure that Scotland's interests are at all times protected, and people can rely upon that in the next Westminster Parliament. So people should vote SNP to protect Scotland and to make sure that we have a future that's made in Scotland for Scotland.
Labour obviously deny that austerity point. You say this election is too close to call, but you've been around long enough to know that the polls can be wrong. So surely for people who want a change in government at Westminster, the best thing for those people to do is to vote for Labour here in Scotland.
There'll be a change of government because the Tories have well and truly lost this election in England. So the question for voters in Scotland is, do they want more austerity from the Labour Party, or do they want to have SNP MPs who will put forward the Scottish interest and protect Scotland from austerity? That's what the SNP will do in the next Parliament, and act to make sure that we have a future made in Scotland for Scotland. So it's all over for the Tories. Labour will be the next government, but for Scotland, we've got to make sure Scotland's interests are protected, and only SNP does that.
For the SNP, what does success look like come Friday?
I want to win this election with a majority of Scottish parliamentary seats for the SNP.
Do you think you will?
That's what we're aiming to do, and that's what I'm confident that we'll do, and we're working very hard to make sure that happens in the country.
You're saying, that it is on a knife edge. Some of the polls are suggesting that Labour are ahead. You must be worried that you're going to lose a chunk of seats in Scotland.
The polls are showing a varied position. One poll this morning shows the SNP ahead in this election in Scotland. So let's just leave it to the voters to decide. They've got a simple choice. The Tories are out of the game. They've lost the election south of the border. In Scotland, for voters, if they want to stop austerity, stop a Labour government imposing more austerity in Scotland, they want to protect the Scottish interest and make sure we've got a future that's made in Scotland for Scotland, they've got to vote SNP.
But there's a limit to what the SNP MPs who are returned can achieve at Westminster. I come back to the point that if Scottish voters want a change in government, they should vote Labour.
There'll be a change in government on Friday because the Tories have lost the election comprehensively south of the border. Labour doesn't need any Scottish MPs to win this election. And for Scotland, do we want to have Labour MPs going from Scotland who will just do what they're told by Keir Starmer, or do they want SNP MPs who will stand up for Scotland, protect the Scottish interest and campaign against the austerity that the Labour Party is going to impose on Scotland, because they're going to carry on where the Tories have left off? So for people in Scotland, if they want to be protected from austerity, if they want to have the Scottish interest put forward at all times, they've got to vote for the SNP.
Well, that was John Swinney talking to our Scotland reporter, Katie Hunter, a short time ago. And Katie joins us live now from the SNP campaign. What do you think you gleaned from that interview in terms of where the SNP stand?
Well, it's been a pretty consistent message from John Swinney over the last few days. At the start of this campaign, he was talking about, austerity, Brexit and the cost of living crisis. In his eyes, he blames the Conservatives for all three of those. Then, as the campaign has gone on, he has concentrated on Labour and on Sir Keir Starmer. But over the last few days, we've really heard John Swinney say that, in his opinion, he believes that the election is a foregone conclusion. You heard him saying there, he is saying that Labour do not need Scotland to win this election, and he's hoping that that message in this last day and over the last few days will convince SNP voters who are maybe wavering about voting for Labour. He's hoping that that will convince them to turn out and vote for the SNP. But he has been saying for a few days now that this election is too close to call in Scotland. It is on a knife edge in his opinion, and we've got not long to go until we find out if he's right.
And Katie, the key thing here really is the SNP is looking at those key seats where the race is particularly close between the SNP and Labour.
Yeah, absolutely. I am at a bus stop in Airdrie at the moment. The battle bus is not here, but we are at a bus stop waiting for it. This is the second campaign visit of today. There are at least 5. I think there might be more. And today, John Swinney is targeting central belt seats. And as you said there, the polls are suggesting a tighter race between the SNP and Labour. And that is especially true across the central belts of Scotland. All the political enthusiasts will be keeping a really close eye on this part of Scotland to see how the seats fall, and there will be some really closely fought battles here if the polls are correct. And that's why leaders of all parties, but Labour and the SNP in this part, are saying that these constituencies could be very close. Every vote matters, and all the party leaders want their supporters to turn out and vote for their party.
Katie, thank you very much indeed for that. That's Katie Hunter following the SNP campaign trail. Now, look, here at the BBC, we don't do things by halves, do we? And the brilliant Newscast podcast, I know all of you listen to it, I do, today is doing something a little bit extraordinary. It is running for 6 hours live, right? 6 hours live with all the election news that you want on this final day of the election campaign. We can cross live to its presenter, Adam Fleming, the host of Newscast. Adam, do you have a potty? Because 6 hours is a very long time for anyone's bladder. Auntie Mariam is worried.
Thing is, though, listening to you saying what the concept was there, I was like, actually, is this such a good idea after all? It seemed like quite a good way to kind of meet this momentous moment in our national story. But now I'm wondering, when will I have lunch? When will I go to the loo? Basically, we're going to be joined by special guests throughout the next 6 hours just to have a chat about what's going on. And the first big name that's coming in at 11:30 is David Dimbleby. And I'm pondering about whether my first question to him should be, when you were doing all those famous election nights, like 1997, when did you go to the loo? But somehow it feels kind of a bit inappropriate to ask.
Are you saying that what I just asked you is inappropriate?
No, not at all. Not at all. I just mean it's like David Dimbleby. It's like asking Gandalf when does he go to the loo.
That is true. So tell me a little bit about what you're going to be doing, because, this is the last full day of campaigning and you're making the most of it, aren't you?
Yeah, so when I was a political journalist, this was such an amazing day to be on the campaign trail, because inevitably you'd be tied up with a big political figure and you'd dash around the country with them. I remember doing it with George Osborne on the Tory battle bus in 2015. You'd get up early, you'd hit the road, you'd visit as many factories, workplaces, TV studios, service stations, locations as you could fit in a sort of manic 12-hour period. And I just wanted to recreate that experience for newscast listeners and also people who've never listened to newscasts. So we thought, why don't we just do a 6-hour live marathon rolling podcast and do all the usual things we do in our podcast, which is like hang out with our friends like Chris Mason and Alex Forsyth and whatever battle bus or car park they happen to be in at that moment. Get in interesting people, either from the political parties or commentators or experts, to like dive into the detail and just enjoy this moment as much as we sort of report on the details and the significance of it as well. So that's what we're going to try and capture today. And I should just say that it's very, very easy to tune in. You go on BBC Sounds and at the top of the app, you know, at that bit where you've got the different radio stations, we are sandwiched in between 5 Live Sports Extra and BBC 6 Music. And it's the Election 2024 live stream. And if you click on that, if you click on it right now, you get Nikki Campbell doing your call. If you click on it at 11, you'll get me and friends. So
it's all starting at 11, Adam. And can I dip in and out of it if I want to?
Of course, yeah. We'll be there the whole time. And there'll always be, I guarantee you, there'll be something interesting for your ears every single moment.
Amazing. Adam Fleming, it's good to see you there. Good luck for your 6-hour political podcast marathon. Absolutely. I salute you and all of your colleagues there. That's a long stint. You can listen to that newscast all day from 11 o'clock this morning, as Adam mentioned there, on BBC Sounds on the election stream. Now, let's talk to you a little bit more about the Lib Dems. They have been on the campaign trail today. And earlier on, we saw Sir Ed Davey driving a tractor, no less. He loves a bit of countryside. Let's have a look at those pictures there. He's driving a tractor in Wiltshire. That's all I can tell you. The Lib Dems always have a serious message when they do these fun photo opportunities. Of course, we've seen Sir Ed Davey doing things like, you know, being interviewed while playing tennis. He's done bungee jumping. He's done Zumba. He's had the most fun, I think, on the campaign trail. That's fair to say, is it not? And someone else who's had a lot of fun, I'm sure, is our news correspondent, Tom Simons, who's been with the Lib Dem campaign for a while now. I think you're going to miss this, aren't you, Tom, when it's done?
Well, you know, we have to remain impartial, but it's been an experience. Let's put it that way, choosing my words very carefully. Many people have said that Ed Davey's been living his best life, going through a midlife crisis, perhaps, is another way of putting it. He says, actually, interestingly, he had a chat with us on the bus earlier, that he thinks that all the stunts have allowed him to discuss policy more than he's been able to do in previous elections. And certainly he's been very happy to do any number of interviews about the Lib Dems policies. Today he's stressing final messages on care, on the importance of improving the care system, the social care system. The Liberal Democrats are offering to spend up to £9 billion on NHS and on personal social care. And the other thing I wanted to know from him today, we've talked a lot about the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats because the Conservatives are the main target seat, really, that the Liberal Democrats is trying to target. They haven't talked much about Labour, and I tried to really understand from him what concerns he might have about a Labour government with a big majority. He really wouldn't go there. He's trying very hard to keep us talking about the Liberal Democrats and their policies and not other parties.
And Tom, you know, this is, as I mentioned earlier, the last day ahead of campaigning. We've all seen the polls and what they're predicting for the Lib Dems. Is there a feeling amongst those within the Lib Dem campaign that those polls could actually end up coming to fruition?
Well, look, we have tried day after day after day to get the Lib Democrats to talk about what would be a good result for them. They currently have 8 seats. It's actually 15, but 8 if you take the boundary changes into account. If they got their record gain in seats compared to 1997 when they did the best they've done in 100 years, they'd get another 26 or so. So, you know, then you're looking at sort of, you know, 30s around that in terms of numbers of seats. Some of the polls are putting them at 50, 60, even 70 seats in the new House of Parliament. I mean, and so really that will be a very good night for the Liberal Democrats. If they push the SNP into fourth place. So the Liberal Democrats come third in this election in terms of numbers of seats. They then get something quite useful, which is the chance to ask questions at every Prime Minister's questions. Ed Davey says at the moment he only gets about 1 in 5 PMQs to ask a question. Obviously, if he comes in second, and some of the polls put that as a slight possibility, then he becomes the party of opposition. That opens up all sorts of extra money and advantages that he would have, and would be a major breakthrough for the Liberal Democrats. But really only the outsider polls are saying that. I think that the Liberal Democrats are not even dreaming of that at the moment. But it is clearly a game-changing election for the Lib Dems because their targets are so many, in so many cases, are Conservative seats, and the Conservatives are really struggling, at least as far as the polls are saying.
OK, Tom, thank you. Just one more thing before you go. Are you allowed to go and give the tractor a bit of a spin or not? They're right behind you.
Well, look, you know, some of my colleagues in the press pack here have engaged in some of these activities. We've taken a slightly po-faced approach. We really shouldn't be taking. We should be challenging the leaders and not so much having fun alongside them.
No.
But it has been fun watching, and it has given us something to do.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been fun.
I will say one
talking
thing.
to
I
you,
was
Tom.
impressed by the bungee jumping.
Absolutely, me too. Tom Simons, thank you very much indeed. Tom, who's been following the Lib Dem campaign for us. Thanks again. Well, as always, if you want to read more about the election campaign, the constituency candidates and the latest on those polls that I was talking about with Tom, you can go to the BBC's website or the news app from wherever you are. Let's take you away now from politics briefly and talk about the Post Office inquiry, because the former chair of the Post Office, Tim Parker, will give evidence today to the inquiry into the Horizon IT software scandal that led to hundreds of sub-postmasters being wrongly prosecuted for stealing. Well, let's cross live now to our correspondent, Andy Verity, who is at the inquiry and joins me now. And Andy, what have we been hearing today?
Good morning. Well, Tim Parker, of course, he's an interesting political figure. He was Deputy Mayor of London under Boris Johnson, so he's very well connected in the Conservative Party. He came to be chair of Post Office in the summer of 2015. He was appointed by Sajid Javid, then the business secretary. And what we're seeing here, because the chairman of the Post Office is the point of contact with the government, we're getting insights, flashes of insight, really, which we've had quite few of in the Post Office inquiry until now, of the connections between the Post Office and the government and what the government knew about what the Post Office was up to. We've heard that he asked Sajid Javid, the business secretary, to see the accounts before he looked at the business, and he's described how he joined a business that was in deep crisis, according to him, because of various things like the income it had had from benefits and the like had gone online, so it no longer had that business, and there were problems which it was dealing with, like the Alan Bates Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance. But we've heard, for example, we've seen a presentation about the Post Office senior management for its shareholder, the shareholder executive, which is part of the business department. And in that, they talk about how Paula Venables was not seen as the optimal person to run the Post Office. She didn't have a good relationship with Joe Swinson. She failed to hold on to key staff. She was unable to work with personalities and approaches that differed from her. And also that his predecessor, Alice Perkins, previous chair of the Post Office, had questioned her suitability. So you're seeing very clearly how the shareholder of Post Office, the government, had sway and took decided views over what the senior management was up to.
OK, Andy, thank you very much indeed for that. Andy Verity there at the Post Office inquiry, which, of course, is continuing. And you can get more on that story, as always, on the BBC's website. We can cross now, I think, to Airdrie, and there is the SNP leader, John Swinney. He's talking to SNP campaigners. He's on the campaign trail well and truly today. He was talking to our Scotland reporter, Katie Hunter, a little bit earlier about the SNP and about where they believe they are in terms of the election, but also pushing forward the message of the SNP that if you want to protect Scotland's interests, in his own words, then SNP is the party to vote for. He warned, as Katie told me earlier, about the Labour Party, about Labour Party potentially bringing, in his opinion, austerity to Scotland. So the SNP reiterating its message that the election in Scotland is on a knife edge, in its own words. There we have John Swinney with campaigners in Airdrie, continuing the SNP campaign there. Well, let's now turn our attention back to the Labour Party, because, of course, the Labour Party is on the campaign trail in 3 of the 4 nations. It's doing Wales, it's doing Scotland and it's doing England. Quite a busy day, isn't it, for Labour? Quite a lot of ground to cover, and a busy day, as always, for our brilliant political correspondent, Jess Parker, who is on that bus now. You're back on the bus, Jess. Talk us through a little bit about what Labour is putting forward in terms of its final message today.
Yeah, good morning to you. I'll just check. It is still morning. Losing track a little bit as we dart from place to place. But we've just been at a venue in southwest Wales with Keir Starmer where he addressed Labour supporters, Labour candidates. And look, it was a lot more of the same criticism of the Conservative record and reiterating that message that if you want change, you have to vote for it. Now, what Labour, of course, are trying to do is get their vote out, and this has become, I think, particularly pertinent this morning after Mel Stride, the Work and Pensions Secretary, came out and said, quite remarkably, given he is a Conservative, that he thinks the country's likely heading for the largest majority it's ever seen for Labour. This is not normal at this stage of an election campaign. I put this to Sir Keir Starmer. I pressed him on what he thought this Tory tactic was all about, because these messaging, it's not accidental that these things are said largely. There is an intention behind it. And he told me that he thought it amounted to voter suppression. I'm just reading the quotes here from my screen. It's trying to get people to stay at home rather than Keir Starmer told me. So I think Labour today are really going to be trying to combat any fears that they might have, that this talk of a so-called Labour supermajority, as the Conservatives certainly put it, you don't hear that from Labour, could deter people from going out to vote Labour because they might think it's some kind of done deal. That's exactly what Sir Keir Starmer is going to be trying to combat today. He's saying that there are constituencies where there's just a few hundred votes in it. So it's really just this drive to try and motivate people just ahead of polling day to get out and vote. And I think you'll be hearing that throughout the day as we dart from Wales to Scotland and then to England as well, as Sir Keir Starmer does this final dash across 3 nations.
And Jess, I'm not sure if we can show these pictures, but I've seen what you posted on the BBC's live page. I'll describe it to viewers who may not be able to see it here, but they can go on the BBC's live page and have a look. These are Welsh cakes wrapped up in cellophane with a Welsh Labour sticker on them. Did you get a packet, and can you bring it back to New Broadcasting House? Because I love a good Welsh cake.
I don't think we did get a oh, no. Here we go. The cameraman Jake did get a packet of branded Labour Welsh cakes. I was feeling a bit mortified there when you asked me. I was like, forgot to get them. I mean, just to explain to viewers, it is not unusual for parties to get items, objects, foodstuffs, drinks, whatever, and stick their branding on it. And as we walked into the venue today for the first event, we spotted, we are in Wales after all, some Labour branded Welsh cakes. We do have them here on the bus, so lots of snacks floating around. But that's something that a lot of parties do as a fun way of trying to get their branding out there. So yeah, just to assure you, we do have them there. And I also was sort of talking on the live page as well about the kind of atmosphere, aside from the Welsh cakes, that might have been cheering the mood, but certainly talking to activists and campaigners today, they certainly do seem to feel, when you speak to them in private, they're feeling pretty optimistic despite the cautious public messaging. And I don't think that is just the Welsh cakes. I think certainly there is an upbeat mood, a buoyant mood amongst the Labour campaigners and activists at the moment.
It's not just the sugar high, and it's important to reiterate, isn't it, here on the BBC, that other Welsh cakes are also available. There you go. I've covered ourselves, haven't we, Jess? Thank you very much indeed, Jess Parker, on the Labour campaign bus with snacks floating around, she says. Sounds good. Sounds better than here. I've got nothing here apart from a glass of water. But there you go. Less moaning, Mashiri. Now, on the last day of election campaigning, a Conservative cabinet minister has told the BBC he accepts that if the polls are correct, the Labour Party is heading for the largest majority this country has ever seen. They were Mel Stride's comments, and they come as party leaders head into their final campaign events. As we mentioned earlier, Rishi Sunak has told a Conservative Party rally he will fight for every vote. While you heard there from Jess, the Labour leader Keir Starmer has just been to Wales. He's heading to Scotland and England, and he's saying that tomorrow is an opportunity for, in his words, people to turn the page and to move forward. Well, with a roundup, here's our political correspondent, Helen Catt.
So I totally accept that where the polls are at the moment means that tomorrow is likely to see the largest Labour landslide majority, the largest majority that this country has ever seen, much bigger than 1997, bigger even than the national government in 1931. What therefore matters now is what kind of opposition do we have? What kind of ability to scrutinise government is there within Parliament? And that is a strong reason to not give the Labour Party that.
So, sorry, you have accepted, as Working Pensions Secretary, that the election is lost?
I have accepted that where the polls are at the moment, and it seems highly unlikely that they're very, very wrong because they've been consistently in the same place for some time, that we are therefore tomorrow highly likely to be in a situation where we have the largest majority that any party has ever achieved.
So you could say the Conservatives have lost?
We are fighting for every single vote.
Wow, that's embarrassing. That wasn't Helen Catt, was it, at all? That was, of course, Mel Stride talking to my colleague Emma Barnett on Radio 4's Today programme a little bit earlier. And what he said has caused a little bit of surprise, to say the very least, amongst the media in the world of politics. Our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman, gave this reaction to Mr Stride's rather strange concession on the Today programme. Have a listen.
I can think of some stronger words than strange. This is not normal. It is not typical, to state the obvious, for a cabinet minister, or indeed any politician really, to essentially concede defeat the day before millions of voters go to the polls and actually determine what the outcome of this general election is. So what is Mel Stride trying to do? Well, look, it's been clear for a few weeks that the Conservatives think that their best hope of averting a vast Labour victory is, perhaps counterintuitively, to talk up a vast Labour victory. And that's what they've been doing for ages with the supermajority rhetoric, which we've all become familiar with. But this goes way beyond that. This is not a possible supermajority that Mel Stride was alluding to. He said it was almost certain that Labour would win the biggest majority any single party has ever won. It's extraordinary rhetoric, and needless to say, I don't think this is what would have been in the Conservatives' campaign grid as their closing message when they called this election 6 weeks ago.
It's the final day of campaigning, Henry, and that final message, apart from Mel Stride's message, but what are the main parties trying to put forward today to voters on this very last day, last gasps?
Well, in a more low-key and less dramatic way than Mel Stride, it is basically the Conservatives' closing message that, as it stands, Labour are going to win and going to win big. And so Rishi Sunak will be using that supermajority language as he campaigns in the southeast of England this afternoon to try to win back Conservative waverers. I think, actually, what he's doing in trying to talk up how big a Labour victory could be is he's not really targeting that message at people who might vote Labour, but actually at people who might vote for Reform UK or for the Lib Dems. He's trying to win them back to the Conservative fold, almost pitching the Conservatives as a strong opposition rather than as a potential party getting a fifth term in government, which is what they would get if they win this general election. And actually, a lot of the smaller parties, they're also arguing that this election is a foregone conclusion because they want potential Labour voters to decide that they can vote for a different party because the course of government is fixed. So you end up in this funny position where Labour, and Keir Starmer is campaigning in England, Wales and Scotland today, and Labour are basically the only party here saying that a Labour victory isn't inevitable. It's all a bit shaken up. But what you will hear from Labour today is that, yes, change, that one word that's been their slogan throughout this campaign, but that it only happens if you vote for it. And that's the message you will hear Keir Starmer hammering again and again, because they don't want potential Labour voters to stay at home or vote for someone else because they think that other people are doing the business of voting for Labour and getting them into government.
Well, that was our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman. As I mentioned earlier, today is, of course, the last day of campaigning. Things take a different form, don't they, for the big political parties when there's so little time left. Doesn't mean they take the foot off the pedal as such, but what is it that they're trying to put forward to voters as that clock ticks ever closer to the end of all campaigning and the beginning, finally, of those first votes being cast? I'm very happy to say that I'm joined by two people who know exactly how parties are approaching this final stage of the campaign. I'm joined by Keir Starmer's former Director of Policy, Claire Ainsley, and also by Charlie Rowley, who is a former special advisor to Michael Gove and Theresa May. It's so good, Claire and Charlie, to have you both on the programme. I'm sure we're going to have an interesting conversation, but if I may ask you, Charlie, first of all, what do you make of Mel Stride's comments today?
Well, good morning, and thanks for having me on. I think, first of all, what Mel was effectively trying to do was to say what the Tory campaign has been putting out in the last couple of weeks, which is that don't risk all of the hard work and progress that's taken place with the economy by having a Labour supermajority. It's something that Boris Johnson said last night. He gave a rabble-rousing speech to activists in central London, just making that point that now is not the time to risk it. Now is not the time to have to vote to increase your taxes, to have unrivaled immigration, illegal immigration into this country, and to have a Starmageddon situation where Labour can do all kinds of things without being checked by a strong opposition. So I think what Mel was effectively trying to do was to carry on that message and used a set of words this morning to articulate that.
But do you not think it's strange that he's admitting defeat, conceding defeat 24 hours before the polls open?
I don't think so. I mean, look, it's you've got to look at the polls. Yes, the polls have narrowed. That's something that you'd expect, and it's something that should be welcomed by Conservatives and people that are looking at the Conservatives again. Couple that with what Boris Johnson was saying last night. It was a rabble-rousing speech. And it is now something that everybody has a very clear choice to make. Do you want to vote for a party that has secured the economy, that it's started to grow, where inflation has come down, where wages are growing again? Do you want to put all of that at risk? Now, I think what Mel was just saying is that you look at the polls, it is going to be difficult if the polls are reflected in reality. But it's not about admitting defeat. It's just saying it's still going to be a hard 24 hours. That's why every Conservative activist, anybody who's standing in this election, is going to be out on the doorstep in the next 24 hours making the case to the public why they should continue to vote Conservatives, why they should stick with Rishi Sunak and not put that at risk by voting Labour or Reform or any other party.
OK, thanks for that, Charlie. Claire, let me bring you in at this point. What is Labour thinking in these last few hours? I mean, you're getting that feel, aren't you? You've had it for quite a long time, that they really want people to get out there and to actually vote. That's their big worry, that people may not end up doing that.
Labour are using their opportunities on the airwaves and on the doorstep to put their positive case for change. They're absolutely not complacent. I know you've heard that hundreds of times probably on this programme and others, but they understand that people are just really fed up with politics in general. A lot of people just feel like they've been really let down, and I don't think Labour blames them for that. I think what they want to see and what they want to say is that this is the opportunity that so many people have been waiting for to vote for change. We've seen for a year, 2 years now, that the Conservatives, every time people have a chance to vote for change, they tend to grasp it. So I don't think these last-ditch tactics from the Conservatives are really what their voters want to hear. I think people are really wanting to say, well, what are you going to do for me? What's going to be different now if I vote for you? And that's what Labour are taking the opportunity to put forward.
But there have been a few times, haven't there, Claire, when Sir Keir Starmer's being asked, look, what is it that Labour are going to do when they come into power? What exactly we're going to see in those first, few days? And has that question, do you think, been answered in a way that is satisfying for people at home?
Well, you're right. There are lots of areas that are going to be really difficult, and I do think Labour have been pretty straight about saying we've got to be honest about the state of the public finances, the depth of the problems. So what Labour have tried to do is set out a longer term vision, but these first steps on the road to change. So whether it's about stabilising the economy, about getting those appointment times for GPs that we know we need, they're putting out, I think, a realistic plan. They haven't said in every single area all the specifics about what they're going to do. But do you know what? I think if they did, then voters would turn around and say, well, how are you going to do all of that then? So I think it's actually a much more realistic plan they've put forward. But as Labour have been saying, it doesn't happen unless people get out tomorrow and vote. And there are a lot of people who are still undecided that I've been speaking to.
Charlie, let's bring you back into the conversation now and talk about how important these final days are. Or are they? Is there a feeling now that people have pretty much made up their minds?
Well, it's all to play for. I mean, the last 24 hours are, I think, going to be crucial in this particular election because of all the polls that we hear. The one that always surprises me and is exciting, for want of a better word, is the amount of people that are still undecided. And that is a huge number of people in this country that are undecided. They don't know who they're going to vote for. And you kind of think to yourself, well, if the polls have been so bad, as they have been for the Conservatives, or if it's going to be a total supermajority and a total landslide for the Labour Party, then why are there so many undecided voters? If you haven't decided now that you're going to vote for change, which Labour have been putting forward, then perhaps you never will. So I think if you are particularly conservative today, if you heard what Boris said last night, if you've been hearing over the last 48 hours from the Labour campaign, where I think there was a little bit of a gaffe from Sir Keir Starmer talking about clocking off at 6 on a Friday, something that's been jumped upon and he's been questioned about yesterday. I think couple that also with the question that you were just asking there about the Labour manifesto and the campaign, where people just don't quite know what change they're going to get. They don't know what Labour stands for. All of that, I think, accumulates to the very last days and hours and minutes and seconds of this campaign, where there are so many undecided voters. It's up to Conservatives, or any other party for that matter, to go to the doorstep, to target those people who are undecided or their own support base, to make sure that they get out and vote tomorrow and have a very clear choice.
Claire, let me talk to you about the campaign. How do you think the Labour campaign has gone till now?
I think the Labour campaign has gone pretty well, actually. They've said that they're proud of the campaign they fought, and I think that's right. I think lots of people, as I say, have been wanting to have a general election. If you ask the public 6 months ago that have had a general election, I think a lot of people made up their minds some time ago that they didn't want to vote Conservative. And actually, the campaign's been an opportunity for Labour to really put forward a much more positive, uplifting case, a hopeful case about what the country could be if we have this fresh change behind a united Labour Party led by Keir Starmer. So I think for Labour it's been an opportunity, but they can tell that they are ready for tomorrow. But most importantly, if voters put their trust in Labour, they are ready to form a government once again. And hopefully we can turn that page and we can have a much more positive future for the country. And I'm looking forward to it.
Charlie, what do you make of the Conservative campaign? We have had a couple of issues, haven't we? The D-Day scenario, things like that haven't helped, have they?
No, they haven't, and you can't get away from that. But I think, in a campaign where, yes, things go wrong. Yes, there's been a lot of scrutiny on the Conservative Party, the internal party warfare that's taken place over the last couple of years, coupled with this campaign on its own. There has been a lot of attention devoted to the Conservatives and Rishi Sunak. When things go wrong, they may be slightly heightened. I'm not getting away from the D-Day scenario, but the Prime Minister apologised for that. But I think, and in a campaign, every day, every second, every minute, matters. And so, yes, some of the attention that the Conservatives would have wanted to be focusing on policy and some of their ideas might have been sucked out of the public's mind. But what the central message is, and what I think voters can actually understand, is that when it comes to voting, when you put your cross in that box tomorrow, is it going to be for a party that is offering change that hasn't been scrutinised, that hasn't been tried, that hasn't been tested, that hasn't got a plan, that nobody knows what Sir Keir Starmer stands for, versus someone who is saying, look, he works day and night, he's turned the economy around, inflation is down, wages are up, the economy is growing. Now is the time not to put all of that at risk. So whatever the problems have been within the Conservative camp over the last months during this campaign, whatever issues there have been within the Conservative Party in terms of government over the last couple of years, you've got to judge Rishi Sunak on his record and what he's done and where he's got the country back to, having gone through a divisive Brexit, having gone through difficult times during COVID. Now is not the time to have a leap into the dark or a leap into the unknown, voting for something that people just don't know what they're going to get. So his message today and tomorrow on polling day, certainly in the last 24 hours of campaigning, will be to don't have a leap into the dark, stick with the Conservatives. Rishi's the man with the plan and can deliver.
OK. Charlie Rowley, Claire Ainsley, it's been good to talk to both of you. Thank you to both of you for joining us today. So it is the last day of campaigning. As I keep on telling you, do you know it's the last day of campaigning? It's the last day of campaigning. And tomorrow the country goes to the vote and all eyes will be on that exit poll published at around 10 p.m. tomorrow evening. You can watch that live on the BBC's main election programme with Clive and Laura. But look, I want to give you a bit of a reminder of all the excitement that awaits.
This is BBC One.
It is 9:25 on election day. The nation has voted. The count is on. Here in the Lime Grove studio, we are waiting for the first results. Something else happens to the results as well. They're passed down here into an electronic computer which we have nicknamed Ella.
I hope when you next interview me, you don't interrupt quite so often.
The reason why one can make a pretty good guess early on in the proceedings about the final outcome is because we in Britain are, perhaps thank God, so unified a country.
Welcome to Election Studio One at the Television Centre in London.
Good evening. Well, it looks like being one of the most exciting election nights ever, with the possibility of a very close result and the prospect of Britain having its first woman Prime Minister at the end of the night.
And where there's despair, may we bring hope.
Well, a new dawn has broken, has it not?
10 o'clock. And this is what we're saying.
According to tonight's exit poll, it looks like we are heading for a hung parliament, the first since 1974.
The Conservatives on 316.
Well, this does feel quite sensational.
With the situation even more uncertain.
Up the stairs, he opens the door, and as Prime Minister, he goes in.
But elections wouldn't be elections without a bit of the razzmatazz and even a bit of a gamble.
This is a great and exciting moment.
I've just been told that somebody outside declares that they've just seen a mouse run along the top of the State of the Parties board. I am asked by the studio manager to tell you that this is not true, madam. Either you've been celebrating the election too well, or you had a little electronic mistake of some kind. There are no mice in here whatsoever.
Can I say the same about New Broadcasting House? I don't know. It gives you goosebumps, doesn't it? If you love politics in the way that I do, that's amazing. Now, we can watch, as always, all the latest here on BBC News, and we will carry the results live tomorrow evening in our special programme presented by Clive and Laura from 10 o'clock. Now, if you still have some questions ahead of tomorrow's elections, you're more than welcome to head to the BBC News website and app, where you will find details of candidates in your area, guides to party manifestos, interviews with party leaders, all of it on bbc.co.uk/news or the BBC's News app. Now, they are some of the most successful animated films in history, and this weekend, Despicable Me 4 arrives in our cinemas. Our culture correspondent Charlotte Gallagher has been meeting and chatting all things Minions with lead actor Steve Carell at Wimbledon.
The most important part of a heist is being aware of potential dangers.
Reformed supervillain Gru and his minions are back again for a new adventure. Despicable Me is one of the world's most successful animated franchises. Lead actor Steve Carell has been in all of the 6 films and has been explaining their appeal to me.
What?
I think ultimately he's a good person. He's fighting against his own goodness because he wants to be bad.
He's desperately trying to be
Desperately wants to be despicable, but he really isn't. I mean, at his core, I don't think he is.
Why do you think the films have been so popular with kids? Because you look at Gru and you think it might not be a character that kids would relate to, or he's not cuddly, is he?
The reason I signed on was the writing wasn't condescending towards kids. It was a little edgy. It was a little scary, and I think kids like that. I think kids like it when it's not spoon-fed to them, and they like things that they can kind of figure out on their own, and maybe get a little scared, maybe feel a little uncomfortable, but then laugh really hard. The Minions really bring everything together in terms of the movie.
That doesn't count! And, oh, what?
So, with Steve's character trying tennis, where better to take him than Wimbledon?
There's a scene in which Gru is trying to fit into this new town, and he joins some very snobby local people to play tennis at their club, and he's never played tennis in his life. So he's trying to pretend that he's good at it, and he's clearly not. And the Minions come in and help him out.
What the?
He has the right equipment, but he just doesn't have any of the tennis acumen to pull it off. But it works out okay.
And were you channeling anyone in that scene? Thinking of Andy Murray, Federer, Serena Williams?
Sure. John McEnroe. I was channeling John McEnroe as I was doing Gru.
Dwight, get in.
Carell, of course, is known for another iconic role in The American Office.
And I have to ask you, because so many people have said about Michael Scott, I know you're not going to be involved in The Office, kind of reimagining. Would you ever?
No.
I'm praying now. Would you ever?
No.
No. We want to know what he's up to there.
No. It wouldn't make sense. That crossover wouldn't make sense in any way. I think they just need to have their own show and let it be their show.
For now, Carell seems content with his Minions and that growing all-star cast, including his friend Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell's a genius, I'm going to say it.
He's also moving into soccer, football over here.
Yes.
He's invested in my team, Leeds United.
I heard, yeah.
Would you be tempted to maybe?
No, I think some of my friends have cornered the market on investing.
Listen,
in
anyone will
teams.
take you. You'll be welcome. You could join in.
How about I could invest in a curling team?
Investing in curling?
Sure.
Despicable Me 4 is expected to rake in around $100 million over its opening weekend. It will be in UK cinemas on the 12th of July. Charlotte Gallagher, BBC News.
Now time for a look at the weather with Carol.
Hello again. If you have an allergy to pollen, today for most of us the levels are either low or moderate. The exception to that is across the far southeast of England where the levels are high, and we're talking especially grass pollen at this time of year. Now today we've got two weather fronts bringing rain. The first one pushing into the North Sea, the second one moving from the west towards the east, and as you can see from the isobars, it's going to be a breezy day wherever you are. So as the rain clears away to the east, there'll be residual cloud and a few showers, some dampness left behind it. The second weather front also moves eastwards. It's later in the day that we see a return to sunshine and showers in western areas, with temperatures ranging from 12 to 18, possibly 19 in the far south. For Wimbledon today, well, play is likely to be interrupted with rain early doors, and then as that clears away, we're looking at a lot of cloud, which could produce some light rain or drizzle into the afternoon at times. Tomorrow is looking drier and brighter, but a bit windier. So this evening, you can see how the rain becomes ensconced in Shetland. Then we've got a plethora of showers across the northwest of the country. Here too, there'll be gusty winds, move further south, and it's drier and it's clearer, with overnight lows between 8 and 13 degrees. So then, as we head into tomorrow, we've got this little system scooting across the north of the country. And if you look at the isobars, it tells you it's going to be a windy day wherever you are. But the strongest winds will be in the northern half of the country. So we've got showers coming in courtesy of that weather front, some of them merging across Scotland to give some longer spells of rain. Could be heavy and thundery, come further south, and it's drier and brighter. These are the sustained wind speeds you can see in the circles. The gusts, of course, will be more than that. And our temperatures, 11 to 15 in the north, will feel cool in the wind and the rain. If you get out of the wind and into the sunshine in the south, 20 will feel quite pleasant. Now, Thursday night into Friday, we've got this next system coming in across southern areas. That too is going to introduce some more rain. It clears during the course of Saturday and the isobars open out, so it's not going to be as windy. But certainly on Friday, wet and windy in the south, sunshine and showers in the north, and it remains changeable as we head through the rest of the week.